All right, diving right back in. We've been exploring sustainable urban development and, how to build greener, more resilient cities.
Yeah.
And we've got this handbook here with all kinds of guides, case studies, real world examples.
hmm
It's a lot. But today, let's focus on the conclusion, the path forward, the call to action.
Mm.
What does it all mean for folks who want to shape the future of our cities?
Well, the handbook uses this phrase, complex and imperative, about the journey towards sustainable cities.
Yeah, complex and imperative.
I think those two words, they really capture the challenge, don't you think?
They do.
Yeah,
Complex makes sense. Cities are these huge interconnected systems.
right.
But can you break that down a little more for our listeners? Why is it so complex?
It's more than just adding green spaces or switching to renewables.
Okay.
It's about all these challenges and how they're connected. You've got environmental degradation, climate change looming over everything,
Right.
rapid urbanization happening faster than ever, and persistent social inequality.
Yeah.
The handbook argues that you can't really solve one without tackling the others.
So it's like this giant puzzle where every piece is connected to all the others.
Exactly.
Do you have a good example to illustrate that for everyone?
Absolutely. Let's take Rotterdam, a city literally on the front lines of climate change.
Okay.
Rising sea levels are a huge threat there, and their approach is amazing.
Okay.
They've created these water plazas. They're spaces for recreation, but they also absorb rainwater, and they're incorporating green roofs to manage stormwater runoff.
Wow.
So they're not just trying to keep the water out, they're redesigning the city to live with it. It really shows how sustainability depends on the local context.
It's like turning a problem into a design feature.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. But let's go back to that other word, imperative. Why is it so critical to make our cities sustainable? What's at risk if we don't?
This handbook emphasizes it's not just about saving the planet in some abstract way.
Right.
It's about making sure people who live in these cities have a good quality of life. It asks, what should a sustainable city actually feel like to the people who live there?
Okay, I see where you're going with that. Quality of life is a pretty broad term. How does the handbook define that in the context of sustainable cities?
It comes down to three main ideas: inclusivity, greenery, and resilience.
Okay.
They might sound like buzzwords, but they paint a powerful vision for the future. Imagine cities designed for everyone, no matter their income or background,
Mm,
where green spaces are a right, not a privilege, and where communities can handle shocks like climate change or economic downturns.
I love that vision. But I think people might be wondering, how do we get from these big ideas to actual change on the ground? What does the handbook say about that?
Well, that's where the call to action comes in. It doesn't just point out the problems, it actually offers steps different groups can take to move us toward that vision.
Speaking of solutions, I'm curious to hear how the handbook breaks that down. Let's start with urban planners and designers, those shaping the physical structure of our cities. What's their role in all of this?
It challenges them to go beyond traditional approaches and embrace innovative solutions.
Okay.
It points to Melbourne's urban forest strategy as an example.
Okay.
They're not just planting trees randomly, they're strategically placing them to fight urban heat islands, improve air quality, and create those lovely shaded spaces for people to enjoy.
Right.
It's a perfect example of how good design can tackle multiple problems at once.
It sounds like they're treating trees as crucial infrastructure, not just decoration.
Yeah.
That's such a cool concept. Designs need to be implemented, though, and that often means dealing with regulations and policies. What does the handbook say about the role of policymakers in all this?
Policymakers, they have a big responsibility here. They need to create conditions where sustainable practices can thrive.
I see.
The handbook highlights Portland, Oregon as a great example. Their comprehensive plan doesn't just talk about sustainability, it bakes it into every aspect of urban planning: transportation, housing, waste management, everything.
Wow.
They've built robust, bike-friendly infrastructure, invested heavily in renewable energy, and prioritized affordable housing near public transit. It's a holistic approach showing how policy can drive real change.
It sounds like Portland is putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
It's impressive, but I bet some listeners are thinking, well, that's Portland. What about everyone else? Does the handbook offer any guidance for cities that are just starting their sustainability journey?
Definitely. The handbook recognizes there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Every city has its own unique challenges and opportunities.
True.
The key is to embrace innovation and adaptation, using these successful examples as inspiration and figuring out what works best in their specific context.
So it's about taking those big ideas of inclusivity, greenery, and resilience
Yeah.
and finding solutions that fit the local landscape. I love that approach. But while policies and designs are crucial, they don't happen in isolation, right? What about the people who live in these cities, the communities themselves?
Right.
What role do they play in building a more sustainable future?
That's where it gets really interesting. The handbook says communities have a powerful voice and a responsibility to shape their cities.
Okay.
It highlights civic ecology.
Civic ecology.
Yeah, recognizing that we're all connected in this larger urban ecosystem.
I like that phrase, civic ecology.
Mm,
It implies a shared ownership, a shared responsibility.
right.
But how does the handbook suggest communities actually put that into action?
It emphasizes advocacy and participation. Think of it like this. Citizens aren't just passive recipients of urban planning, they're active agents of change.
Okay.
A great example is Copenhagen.
Oh, yeah, Copenhagen.
They've integrated citizen science projects and community-led planning into their urban development.
Wow.
Residents are involved in everything from monitoring air quality to proposing new green spaces.
That's fantastic.
It's this bottom-up approach that gives people ownership and empowers them to make a real difference.
It's a great example of how community involvement leads to real change. But let's be honest, sometimes it feels like individual actions are just a drop in the bucket, especially with huge challenges like climate change or urban sprawl. Does the handbook address that feeling of, what can I really do?
It does. It acknowledges that systemic change is essential. It's not about putting all the burden on individuals.
Right.
It's about creating a framework where governments, industries, and communities work together towards sustainability.
Okay.
Think of it as a three-legged stool.
Mhm.
You need all three legs working to be stable.
I like that analogy. So it's individuals taking action, but also pushing for bigger changes in policy and infrastructure.
Exactly.
But how do we bridge that gap between individual actions and that systemic change? How do we make sure everyone's moving in the same direction?
The handbook emphasizes communication and collaboration, sharing knowledge, inspiring action, creating that sense of collective responsibility.
Well-
And this is where platforms like this deep dive come in, exploring these issues and helping individuals become informed advocates for change in their communities.
So knowledge is power, but it's also about getting people talking and involved.
Absolutely.
But it's not enough to just understand the problems, right?
Right.
We need practical solutions,
Yeah.
steps people can take in their daily lives.
For sure.
What kind of toolkit does the handbook offer?
It encourages us to look at case studies, to learn from what's worked.
Right.
It's like a recipe book for sustainable cities, full of ideas that can be adapted to different places.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Could you give our listeners a taste of what's on that menu? What are some concrete examples of solutions that have worked and could be tried elsewhere?
Let's go back to Portland. They have this policy called inclusionary zoning.
Okay,
It requires new housing developments to include a certain percentage of affordable units.
that's interesting.
It's a way to fight gentrification and make sure diverse communities can thrive.
That's a great example of using policy for social equity along with environmental sustainability.
Yeah,
It reminds us that those two goals are often linked. Any other examples come to mind?
absolutely. Look at Singapore. They've had huge water scarcity problems being a small island,
Right.
but they turned that into an opportunity by creating this innovative water management system.
Wow.
They collect rainwater, purify wastewater, even desalinate seawater. It makes their water supply much more resilient to drought.
It's like creating a closed loop, minimizing waste, maximizing efficiency.
Exactly.
Those are some impressive examples, but I'm sure some people are thinking, those are big projects. What can I, as one person, actually do?
Right.
Does the handbook address that feeling of individual agency?
Definitely. It reminds us that every action matters, no matter how small. It could be choosing to walk or bike instead of driving, saving energy at home,
Okay.
supporting local businesses that are sustainable, even just talking to friends and family about these issues.
So it's about making those conscious choices in our daily lives, recognizing that they all add up.
Yeah.
But beyond individual actions, how does the handbook suggest we push for bigger changes? What's the best way to get involved and make our voices heard?
It really emphasizes community organizing, collective action.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
highlights getting involved in local politics, joining community groups focused on sustainability,
Mm,
supporting organizations that are pushing for policy changes.
right.
It reminds us we're not alone. There are so many people and groups working towards a better future.
Yeah.
And by joining forces, we can make a bigger impact.
It's that think globally, act locally, but with a real sense of urgency now.
Exactly.
It's inspiring to see the passion for change, and this handbook gives us a way to turn that passion into action.
Mm-hmm.
But with so many problems, climate change, social inequality, it can feel overwhelming.
Right.
Does the handbook help us prioritize? What are the most effective things we can do?
It encourages focusing on solutions that tackle multiple challenges at once. This idea of synergy, where actions in one area have positive effects elsewhere,
I see.
like investing in public transit, reduces emissions, improves air quality, less traffic, and it makes cities more accessible for everyone.
So it's finding those win-win solutions that benefit everyone.
Yeah.
It's not just environmentalism, it's social justice, economic well-being, all connected.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach to how we develop our cities.
It sounds like it.
And that's why the handbook stresses collaboration, interdisciplinary thinking.
Makes sense.
It wants planners, policymakers, architects, engineers, community organizers, residents, everyone
Wow, everyone.
to come together, share their expertise, and create solutions that work for everyone.
It's breaking down those walls, recognizing we're all in this together, just like that civic ecology idea.
Exactly.
I think this deep dive has shown us how complex the challenges are, but it's also given me hope.
Me too.
There are so many great solutions being developed and tested,
Yeah.
and a growing movement of people dedicated to a sustainable future. And the handbook ends with a powerful quote that captures that feeling.
It does.
It says, "The future of our cities is not predetermined. It is a canvas upon which we, as a collective, have the power to paint a masterpiece of sustainability, resilience, and shared prosperity."
I love that, painting a masterpiece.
It reminds us we're not just watching the city change, we're actively shaping it.
We are.
And this handbook gives us the tools and inspiration to do just that.
It does.
I think the biggest takeaway is that we don't have to wait for someone else to fix things.
Right.
We can each take action, no matter how small, to create the world we want to live in.
Couldn't agree more.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into sustainable urban development.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And remember, the future of our cities is in our hands.
Let's make it a masterpiece.
Let's do it.